The scream didn't sound like anything from this earth. It sliced the noon heat clean in two and turned the prairie into a room with walls closing in. And when I swung my horse toward the tracks, I knew in my gut that if I was late by even the length of a breath, then somebody was going to die, and I was going to have to live with that. You know what I mean? The kind of choice that rewrites you before you even make it. The rails hummed under the dirt like a rattler warning, the whistle far off and growing. And there she was when the dust cleared, a woman lashed to the iron like a broken wing, a tiny bundle rising and falling on her chest. Yeah, that happened. And no, I didn't think. I just moved that I was off the saddle before the bay had even planted his weight, knife out, heat pulsing through my hands like I was hauling a live wire. And the woman's eyes jumped to mine, terrified but steady in that way desperate people get when they hit the end of the road, and there's no more pretending left. The rope had chewed her wrists raw. The knots were mean and wet with sweat. The baby under that strip of cloth made a sound that barely qualified as a cry, more like a breath with worry tied to it. I cut the baby free first. God forgive me if that was the wrong order, but I needed the child off steel, and the engine's horn tore a hole in the air, closer now, the shadow of the locomotive moving over the grass like a storm cloud with a clock inside it. The last knot wouldn't give, and I put my teeth on it, because sometimes that's what it takes. Sometimes you let the dirt in your mouth and live with it. The rope popped. She folded. I hauled. And we ran. The three of us, a tangled shape the wind pushed at, the ground shaking like the world had a heartbeat, and it was trying to shake us off. And we made it. Lord, we made it. 20 paces into scrub as the engine screamed past, and threw steel breath all over our backs. After a while, when my chest stopped ripping out of me, I said we'd get her safe. And I meant it with the kind of value only make when you've already paid the price in advance. She went out cold like a candle that had given everything it had, the baby tucked against her, and I carried both to the horse with a care I wish I'd used on 1,000 other moments in my life. Let me back up a sec. My name is Charles. My place sits where the grassland takes a breath and flattens for a mile or two. And I used to think I preferred things quiet. But that day told me quiet is just the name we give to trouble when it hasn't found our door yet. I swung into the saddle slow, because when you carry two beating hearts you move like the ground's watching, and I took them home. Mary met us on the porch with those steady hands of hers. Years of nursing calves and burying kin teach you a kind of small, holy courage, and she took the baby first, no questions, no fuss, just a nod that said, I see the shape of what this is, now hand me the living part. We settled the woman in the guest room, lamplight catching the rope burns, the dust in her hair, the kind of stillness after catastrophe that makes the walls hold their breath. Mary cleaned the wounds and hummed the simple songs her mother hummed, and I stood useless and hat in hand in the doorway, which is a truth men don't often admit but ought to, because saying you didn't know what to do is better than pretending you did. She woke around midnight, reached for her chest like a drowning woman breaking surface, and when she saw her baby alive, pink, fussing, greedy for the world, some tight piece in her face loosened, just a touch. She didn't thank me, not then, which was fine. I didn't save her for the thanks, and truth be told, gratitude is heavy and clumsy on the first day. It knocks against the bruises. Dawn came pale and mean, the kind that warms nothing, and I was out fixing a crossbar just to have something under my hands when I looked up and saw her at the window, baby in her arms, eyes scanning the horizon like the land owed her an apology. Later she told Mary her name, Anna, and the baby's name, Jane, and then, in that halting way people use when they're testing whether their voice still belongs to them, she let the story crawl out. A husband, or the paper shape of one, who wrote soft letters with hard lies in them, family with faces like locked doors, a child born into a house where love had been declared a wasted expense. They tied her at midnight, carried her like a problem you want the train to solve, and that's how mercy gets outsourced on the plains. Let the iron do the work. Let the rail absolve the hands that make the knot. You can argue about law out here until the coffee goes cold, but law's only as close as the nearest badge, and sometimes the nearest badge is a day's ride and already overworked. So the question becomes, who are you willing to be when the wind is the only witness? You know, the twist, if you need one, wasn't that her story was cruel. It was that it was deliberate, and that hurt more. I rode into town for salt, nails, and a rumor or two. And sure enough, Tom Weller leaned in over his counter like he always does when talk burns his throat. Told me two men had asked about a woman with a newborn, bought supplies like they liked spending other people's money, heads turned east by habit. Tom's a gossip with a conscience. I'll give him that. And when I left, I rode the slow way home, counting the ridgelines like each was a question I needed to answer. At tea supper, I told Mary and Anna what Tom had told me. Kept it plain because panic is a luxury and we didn't have the budget for it. And Anna's hand tightened on the tin cup till the knuckles went pale, but she didn't cry or beg. She just listened like you listen to weather moving toward your house. That night, I took the rifle down, oiled it, checked the action, not in a way that hopes for a fight, but in a way that understands a promise sometimes stands on two legs because the rifle's the third. Jed, the neighbor boy who drifts in and out like a stray pup, slept with his boots by the door and his mouth open, which would have been funny on another week. They came at first light, two of them, dust hanging behind like a tail their horses hadn't asked for. One broad with a beard cut by a knife and a mirror that didn't care. The other thin in the way mean men get, like the hunger in them has been doing push-ups. They pulled up at my gate and asked for the woman like she was a parcel misdelivered, and the bearded one said she had no right to the child, that the family would be correcting the situation. Those were his words, like decency was a ledger and he had the pen. I told them they were on my land and they'd be leaving the way they came, and I said it light, as if we were talking fence posts and not souls, because out here tone is half the draw. The thin one spat and let his hand drop near enough his belt to have a thought, and I eased the rifle's hammer back and let the little click walk across the yard and take a seat at the table. Inside, the curtain shifted, and I knew Anna was behind it, Jane tucked against her, and I prayed she couldn't hear my heart because a scared heart has a stupid voice. We stared at each other a long moment that wasn't on any clock, and then the bearded man lost a sliver of nerve he couldn't afford, turned his horse, muttered something I'm not writing down because even words don't deserve everything, and they rode off in that embarrassed hurry cowards use when they've had to swallow their own promise. That, right there, was the counterpunch. Sometimes you win without firing, but you still feel the recoil. Days went by and nothing happened in the kind of way that makes you doubt your own eyes. Anna moved softer, but not small. Never that. She fed Jane first and herself after, walked the yard like she was measuring it for a life, and every day the distance between her fear and the porch steps got shorter. Mary gave her little jobs and bigger silences, and I watched the two of them build a language made of folded blankets and shared coffee and the kind of laughter that earns its way in. One evening I rode the high ridge and saw specks on the far rails moving toward town, and I let the land carry the worry the rest of the way because not every question belongs to you forever. Mary brought up the preacher when the light had turned the cottonwood leaves to coins, said he'd be riding through Sunday, and we didn't need more ceremony than a quiet yes under a tree, and I thought about vows. How the words don't hold you so much as remind you of what you've already started to carry. Anna said she'd made vows before and found them brittle, and I told her vows are the walking, not the talking, and the air went still as if the house wanted to hear the answer too. On Sunday we stood under that cottonwood, the creek sounding like a choir that forgot the words but kept the tune, and the preacher's hands were warm, his voice low, and Anna's promise came steady. Walk beside, not behind, never hidden, and mine was plain. Keep you safe, build a life you can breathe in, be a man worth the choosing. We ate chicken and cornbread and Mary's apple pie, and Jed chased chickens into stitches. And if peace has a smell, I think it's fresh wood in a cradle you built with your own two hands. Now here's where I give you the clean, cinematic frame. Sun sliding down the ridge, the porch rail warm under our hands. Jane asleep with that baby bird breath. Anna leaning into me like the long exhale you only let yourself have when the road behind you has stopped talking. The gate is closed. The yard is ours. The rails are a silver line slicing the distance, but not us. And for the first time, she doesn't look over her shoulder. That's the satisfying part. Sure, the one you keep like a photograph in your wallet. But the open part, because life always leaves a door on the latch, lives out there where the land turns dark and the law runs out of breath. Those